Welcome to another video in the series about the C7000 compiler. This video is an overview of the documentation about the C7000 compiler. My name is George Mock and I'm your guide. There's lots of documentation related to C7000. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and feel like you're trying to get a sip of water from a fire hose. This video will help you understand, well, what parts of that documentation are related to the compiler? And then where in the manuals that are related to the compiler, where should I look to answer the specific question I have on my mind right now? Here is a list of the documentation related to the compiler. The first one is the C7000 C Optimizing Compiler User's Guide. This is the central reference. It talks about the compiler and the linker and other related tools. The optimization guide is more of a how do you put some things together to solve a particular piece of getting this code to run fast guide. Okay, it's a little more practical minded. It's not so much a reference work. The Host Emulation User's Guide is specifically about host emulation, running C7000 code on a hosted system like your laptop or your Linux box. And then the last one, the last manual is C6000, the C7000 Migration User's Guide. This is a topic that is not covered in the video series. This is for those people who are currently have code working on C6000 and they would like some specific advice about how do I get this to migrate it to C7000. And the last one actually isn't a manual at all. It's a purely online thing. The release notes that come with every release, but I consider them part of the documentation. They can be very important and very useful in many instances. Here are some more details about the compiler user's guide. I've already said it's the central reference. It's a large manual, is intended to be searched, or you'll look through the table of contents, maybe the index to find the topic you're looking for, and then you go read up on that topic, whatever it may be. No feature of the compiler is a thing until it's been documented in this manual. Okay, the main tools it covers are the compiler itself and the linker. And some other utilities that are covered in there. The runtime support libraries are also described in this manual. Here are some details regarding the optimization guide. So this is practical advice on optimization techniques. This is where you're going to find several things being combined together at once to achieve some particular effect. It also covers the compiler options related to optimization, goes through them and discusses them in some detail. When you're looking at the assembly code generated by the compiler, particularly the comment blocks related to software pipeline, and you want to understand those, this is where you go to do that. There's extensive discussion of that. And as for the video series that you're watching now, it was most influenced by the optimization guide. Next are some details regarding the host emulation user's guide. And remember, host emulation is running code for C7000 on a hosted system. So this is where you can find out the source requirements for doing that, the build requirements, how do you build on your hosted system to perform host emulation. And this is where you can learn how are the C7000 compiler specific features implemented in the world of host emulation, particularly intrinsics and vectors. Here are some details regarding the C6000 to C7000 Migration User's Guide. This is a topic not covered in this video series, but for those of you who presently have a system running on C6000 and you're interested in C7000, this manual is precisely on point for you. It talks about how do you do that process. Well, no special tools are needed. The manual talks about changes with regard to compiler options, changes you need to make in the source, which really aren't very many, but there are a few things to pay attention to. And it describes a header file key to this whole thing called C6X migration.h. Next are some details regarding the release notes. So the release notes are a bit different from the manuals I've talked about prior to this point, because they come with every release. You know, they're generated anew each time. They're really not the same thing, and it's just it's an HTML file and so on. But it's still good to consider this part of the documentation set. It's still something you want to pay attention to. You can often learn some really good information here. It's also known as the README because the name of the file and the root directory of the compiler installation is readme.html. It's also available online, so you don't have to install the compiler to get a look at the release notes. Of course, this is where you will find release-specific information. It will describe the new features that are introduced in that release. It contains a dynamic link to the known defects. That is to say, as defects are added to our system, this link in the release notes, you click on it, you will get a list of the known defects as of the time you clicked on it, okay? Reading the release notes is always worth your time. One of these days you're going to read through this thing and you're going to come across something that will be very useful to you. If you never read the release notes, you're never going to have that experience. Don't be that person. Read the release notes. Now, I show how to get to the manuals using a web browser on the internet. I'm making this recording in November of 2024, so if you do a similar thing close to that point in time, it should look pretty similar, but if you do it farther out in time, expect it to look quite a bit different. You know, that's just how the web works. So the first thing you want to do is take a search for C7000 compiler. And as I expect, the first result is the home page for the C7000 compiler. I expect this search to work like that for a long time. So click the link. And here we are, home page for the C7000 compiler. I want to get to the release notes, and to do that, I want to click on the downloads, then the download options. And for the release, that's the most recent one as of the date of this recording. These are the release notes right here. And then early on in the release notes is the documentation. And here's the manuals. This is the best way to get to the manuals for the C7000 compiler. Here's the compiler user's guide, optimization guide, and so on. I also want to show you another link in here, known defects. I talked about this earlier. Right here, this is the dynamically generated list of defects that are known as of the time that you click on the link. Now the next thing I want to show you is, suppose you want to look at the release notes for an older version of the compiler. Well, the way to do that is to click on this View All Versions, and then you'll see several versions listed over here. Let's pick on 3.1.1.LTS as an example. And here you go. Those are release notes. Here are the release notes for this specific version of the compiler. I want to close this video with two references. The first one we just saw. We saw how to search the internet for C7000 compiler. That'll take you to this link. That's the home page for the C7000 compiler. And you've seen that's where you can download it, of course, access the manuals and more details like that. The second reference is to e2e.ti.com. This is for customer questions on any TI product, including the C7000 compiler. If your question is related to the compiler, it will be answered by me. Thank you for watching this video in the series about the C7000 compiler.